Karoline Leavitt was never one to back down from a fight, but no one expected this. When the fiery conservative figure filed a staggering $800 million lawsuit against The View, it sent shockwaves across the media landscape. But the real twist came when late-night host Stephen Colbert entered the fray, turning his spotlight onto Sunny Hostin with a taunting grin and an agenda of his own. As the courtroom drama collided with the stage of primetime television, one question echoed louder than the rest. How far would they go to silence Karoline Leavitt? Make sure to like and subscribe for more shocking political showdowns and media confrontations. The studio lights had barely cooled after The View's latest broadcast when the news broke. Karoline Leavitt, the young political firebrand with a reputation for precision and punch, had filed a lawsuit that no one saw coming. $800 million. The figure alone was enough to send producers scrambling, but it was the reasoning behind the lawsuit that truly detonated the headlines. What had The View done to provoke such an overwhelming retaliation? Was this really about defamation? Or was there something deeper, something more coordinated, that had pushed Karoline over the edge? It all traced back to a segment aired just 2 weeks prior. The panel had grown heated, more than usual. Sunny Hostin had launched into a sharp critique of Leavitt's political stances, her past campaign appearances, and her growing popularity with young voters. But this wasn't just opinion. According to Leavitt's legal team, it was a targeted character assassination, masked as casual commentary. They argued the remarks went beyond free speech, alleging deliberate malice and factual distortions broadcast to millions of viewers. Could a daytime panel show really hold that much power? Or was this lawsuit about reclaiming control from a media industry that had grown too comfortable hurling stones from their glass studios? Leavitt's lawyers wasted no time holding a press conference. Cameras snapped as they laid out a 142-page complaint, alleging defamation, emotional distress, reputational damage, and economic loss. Each word in the filing was sharpened like a blade. The message was clear. This was not a bluff. Karoline Leavitt was out for justice, and no one, not even television royalty, was beyond reach. The backlash was immediate. Networks issued cautious statements. Journalists raced to analyze the legal angles. But among the cacophony of hot takes and legal jargon, one voice cut through with theatrical timing: Stephen Colbert. The late-night host had long reveled in political theater, but this time his monologue hit differently. Standing before his raucous crowd, Colbert lit into the lawsuit with a biting grin, turning his focus not just on Leavitt, but squarely on Sunny Hostin. His segment wasn't just jokes, it was a public taunt. $800 million? Colbert mused, eyebrows raised. Sunny, what did you do? Did you mispronounce her name or burn her village? The audience roared. The clip went viral within hours. But under the applause there was tension. Colbert wasn't defending Hostin. He was daring her, challenging her, daring The View to respond. And respond she did. Sunny Hostin appeared the next morning with a new tone, measured but stinging. She accused Leavitt of playing the victim, of weaponizing lawsuits to score political points. But viewers noticed something else too. A flicker of something in her voice. Was it hesitation? Fear? Or just the beginning of a battle she never wanted? Meanwhile, Leavitt remained composed and curiously quiet, refusing interviews, offering no statements beyond her legal filings. It was as if she knew the storm was coming and had already prepared her shelter. Why was she holding back? What did she know that others didn't? And more importantly, was Stephen Colbert now a legal target too? As tensions boiled on both coasts, and the courtroom calendar filled with looming depositions, the story was no longer about one lawsuit. It was about power, media control, and the battle for truth in a world addicted to spectacle. While Sunny Hostin defended herself with carefully chosen words on live television, Karoline Leavitt's legal team moved with quiet aggression. Behind the curtain of morning talk shows and nighttime comedy monologues, subpoenas were being prepared, evidence was being cataloged, and witnesses, current and former staffers at The View, were being contacted. A narrative was forming, and it was far more intricate than a single segment gone wrong. Deep within the legal documents were accusations that shocked even seasoned media insiders. It wasn't just the panel's rhetoric that was under fire, it was the alleged pattern of coordination behind it. The suit suggested that producers had greenlit a segment fully aware it would ignite public backlash against Leavitt. Internal emails, anonymous leaks, and whispered confirmations from disgruntled former employees hinted at an editorial strategy that blurred the line between political commentary and character assassination. The lawsuit claimed this wasn't a spontaneous moment of opinion. It was a deliberate attack dressed up as journalism. And now, thanks to Stephen Colbert's public mockery, the case had grown legs beyond the courtroom. Viewers were no longer passive. Lines were drawn. Some called Leavitt a hero for confronting a powerful media machine. Others dismissed the lawsuit as a calculated PR move. But buried beneath the noise was one undeniable truth. The View had never faced this kind of threat before. As for Stephen Colbert, his taunts had triggered something deeper than laughter. Sunny Hostin, once shielded by the show's format and her co-hosts, now found herself increasingly isolated. Every word she spoke was replayed, analyzed, and picked apart on social media. Her tone, her facial expressions, even the way she avoided certain questions, it was all being documented by a public that no longer trusted surface-level civility. And Colbert? He did not retreat. Just days after his first jab, he doubled down. With his trademark smirk, he opened his show with mock courtroom sketches, Sunny Hostin drawn in medieval armor, Leavitt brandishing a comically oversized gavel. It was satire, but it hit a nerve. Ratings soared, but so did the tension. Some viewers laughed, but others began to ask, was Colbert protecting Hostin or throwing her to the wolves? After all, his jokes weren't at Leavitt's expense anymore. They focused on the chaos brewing within The View, and more pointedly, on Sunny's unraveling public composure. As depositions were scheduled and lawyers circled like sharks, Sunny Hostin made an unexpected move. She went silent. No on-air remarks, no offhand comments, no press statements. A week passed, and still, nothing. Some believed it was legal advice. Others thought it was fear. But either way, it created a vacuum. Karoline Leavitt, once portrayed as the aggressor, now looked eerily calm in contrast. But calm didn't mean quiet. Leavitt's legal team leaked a stunning development to the press. They had acquired behind-the-scenes footage, unedited, uncut recordings of the show's pre-production meetings, the conversations where topics were assigned, talking points shaped, and tone decided. If those tapes revealed even a hint of premeditated slander, the case would explode. Suddenly, the lawsuit wasn't just about what was said. It was about how it was planned. Stephen Colbert, never one to miss an opportunity, brought the footage up in a sly reference on his next episode. "They say the cameras were rolling before the show even started," he quipped, raising his eyebrows. "That's either evidence or the world's most boring reality show." The audience laughed, but Colbert's tone had changed. Beneath the jokes, there was caution. Was he beginning to sense that this might be bigger than he had realized? Sunny Hostin, too, was beginning to sense it. Inside The View's private production halls, morale had begun to crack. Staff members were reportedly taking sides. Some defended Sunny. Others whispered that she had gone too far, that Colbert had only made it worse, and that Karoline Leavitt's case might actually win in court. And in the middle of this chaos, Karoline Leavitt prepared her first public appearance since the lawsuit. It would be broadcast live. No legal team, no handlers. Just her, a podium, and a country waiting to see if she was the villain or the woman who had dared to expose the hypocrisy of daytime television, and the comedians who defended. The press conference was held at a modest courthouse in New Hampshire, far from the media machines of New York or Los Angeles. But distance meant nothing. Cameras lined the walls, microphones stood in rows like bayonets, and the air was tense with anticipation. Karoline Leavitt emerged not as a bomb-throwing political operative, but as someone composed, deliberate, and radiating quiet fire. She did not read from a script. She did not defer to legal counsel. She spoke plainly. "This lawsuit is not about silencing opinions," she began. "It is about defending truth and holding powerful people accountable when they choose to defame rather than debate." There were no theatrics, no raised voice. But every word was a hammer. Reporters scrambled to ask questions, and Leavitt handled each one with startling poise. When asked about Stephen Colbert's jabs, she didn't take the bait. Instead, she offered a question of her own. "Is it still comedy?" she asked, "when you mock someone's reputation after your friends orchestrate their downfall? Or is it just cowardice wrapped in applause?" That line alone was enough to ignite the next news cycle. The press conference shifted the tone of the entire story. Leavitt's critics found themselves on the defensive, scrambling to label her statements as political theater. But something about her delivery was disarming. She didn't come off as a media-hungry figure looking to score headlines. She looked like someone who had been underestimated and was now showing her cards. The same day, The View returned from its brief hiatus, but something felt off. The usual laughter sounded forced. Sunny Hostin sat stiffly, her eyes not quite meeting the camera. The other panelists tried to lighten the mood, but a visible fracture had formed. No matter how much they tried to pivot to lighter topics, the lawsuit loomed like a ghost behind every word. And then came the footage. Late that evening, an anonymous source leaked a portion of the behind-the-scenes tape that Leavitt's team had referenced. It showed a pre-show meeting. Producers, segment writers, and yes, Sunny Hostin, discussing the upcoming episode. There was no smoking gun, but there was something else. A dismissiveness in tone. A casual cruelty. One line in particular circulated with viral fury. "She's young, she's fake, and she's asking for it." Hostin never denied saying it. The show issued a vague statement about internal discussions being taken out of context, but the damage was done. Even those sympathetic to the panelists began to ask, had this gone too far? Stephen Colbert, now entangled in a mess of his own making, responded with hesitation. For the first time, he opened his show not with a punchline, but a sober disclaimer. "What we say on this show," he told his audience, "should be sharp, but it should also be fair. I'm watching the story unfold like everyone else. And maybe, just maybe, we all got a little too comfortable laughing at the wrong people." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't a joke either. The fallout continued. Ratings for The View began to drop, while Karoline Leavitt's name soared in public polls. Not for policy, not for partisanship, but for courage. Public opinion, once skeptical of the lawsuit, had begun to shift. She had stepped into the lion's den of daytime television and held her ground. And people were watching. Inside ABC, tension reached a breaking point. Executives held late-night meetings, legal teams huddled behind closed doors, and whispers grew louder. Was Sunny Hostin becoming a liability? And then, without warning, a new development broke. A second plaintiff had joined the lawsuit. A former guest of The View, a political independent who had also claimed mistreatment during a prior episode, added her name to the filing. This wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. It was becoming a reckoning. What had started as an $800 million battle over words was turning into a referendum on how media institutions wield their influence, who they choose to platform, who they choose to destroy, and whether the veil of comedy and commentary can still shield them from consequence. As the legal fire intensified, and public sentiment shifted like a tide, one question remained unanswered. Would Sonny Hostin take the stand, or would someone else fall first? The ripple effects of the second plaintiff's entry into the lawsuit tore through the media like a thunderclap. Overnight, the case was no longer confined to Karoline Leavitt's confrontation with The View. It had expanded into a broader crusade against the quiet, corrosive culture of manufactured outrage and targeted ridicule in mainstream broadcasting. Inside the network, executives scrambled. Crisis PR teams were deployed, consultants were flown in, and board members began to question not just the future of The View, but the legacy of its brand. For years, the show had flourished in the delicate balancing act of entertainment and opinion. But now, it was bleeding credibility. And as for Sonny Hostin, her silence became a story of its own. For 12 days, she said nothing. No tweets, no interviews. Not even a glance toward the camera that wasn't heavily filtered through producers' careful stage directions. But behind closed doors, the cracks were widening. Staffers began leaking that she had become combative, paranoid, and bitter. She believed Stephen Colbert had abandoned her. She reportedly blamed him for drawing even more attention to the controversy, accelerating the storm she could no longer control. Her relationship with Colbert had once been lighthearted. Guest appearances, shared jokes, complimentary nods in interviews. Now, they were circling each other like rivals in a scandal neither could fully escape. Colbert, sensing the shifting tide, began subtly distancing himself. He replaced his view-based humor with broader political commentary. He no longer name-dropped Sonny. And in the green rooms of late-night television, the message was clear. She was no longer safe to joke about, but it was too late to contain the blaze. Karoline Leavitt's team, emboldened by public support and a growing archive of internal communications, requested an emergency hearing. Their claim: The View was attempting to destroy potential evidence. Encrypted emails had surfaced. Files were being quietly deleted. A producer had resigned without notice, taking her hard drive with her. The court granted the request. It was a rare move and a damning sign. The judge overseeing the case issued a preservation order, forcing The View and its parent company to freeze all internal communications. In effect, the lawsuit had now paralyzed one of the most influential shows on daytime television, and in the eye of the storm, Karoline Leavitt kept her distance. She gave no interviews, posted no inflammatory remarks, and let the facts speak for themselves. That silence, unlike Sonny Hostin's, was interpreted not as fear, but as strength. She had thrown the stone and stepped back, letting the structure collapse under its own weight. Then came the moment no one expected. Sonny Hostin broke her silence. In a surprise appearance on a late-afternoon news segment, she sat down for a pre-recorded interview. Her expression was hardened, her tone clipped, her eyes hollow. She did not deny the words caught on tape. She did not offer excuses, but what she did do was shocking. She blamed The View. She claimed the producers encouraged personal attacks, that the show's tone was carefully sculpted to provoke headlines, to manufacture viral outrage, to pit panelists against guests. She said her own discomfort had grown over time, but by the point she realized how far it had gone, she was too deep to step back. "I said things I should not have said," she admitted. "But I didn't say them in a vacuum. It wasn't quite a confession, and it wasn't quite an apology. But it was enough." Colbert responded that same night with carefully measured words. "I believe in accountability," he said. "And that includes for those of us who have made jokes about the wrong thing at the wrong time." He offered no laughs, no applause lines. The audience sat in a kind of stunned silence. The jovial court jester of late night was now speaking in the tone of someone who had stared too long into the very cynicism he once mocked. The fallout was immediate. Major sponsors pulled their advertising from The View. Staffers resigned. Lawsuit number 3 was filed by another former guest, this time citing racial bias and orchestrated character smearing. What had begun as a single lawsuit was now becoming a chain reaction of lawsuits, testimonies, and revelations, each more damning than the last. But Karoline Leavitt had not yet had her final say. With the media world crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance, she announced a televised address, scheduled for the following Sunday night. 1 hour. Live. No script. No limits. The network scrambled to secure exclusive rights. Her team refused. It would stream free to the public without corporate filters. The same people who once laughed at her were now forced to cover her rise. And in private, even Colbert was said to be preparing a statement of his own. Not for a joke, not for damage control, but for something he had never attempted before: an apology. The evening of Karoline Leavitt's live address arrived with a gravity no one could ignore. Headlines paused, commentators went silent, and across the country people tuned in, not out of loyalty, but out of sheer curiosity. Could the woman, once dismissed as a political footnote, truly command the nation's attention? Could this be the moment the machine turned on itself? The stage was minimal: a single chair, a clean backdrop, and no teleprompter in sight. Karoline appeared calm. No entourage, no grand entrance. She adjusted her microphone once, looked directly into the lens, and began. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with conviction. She spoke of dignity, what it meant to have it stripped away on national television, then be mocked for demanding it back. She spoke of media culture, how cruelty had become a form of currency, traded daily between hosts, pundits, and comedians. And she spoke of responsibility, how each person behind the desk, behind the camera, and behind the scripts bore a piece of the guilt. Then came the unexpected twist. Karoline revealed that The View had offered her a private settlement, not once, but 3 times. First, a quarter of the amount she sued for, then half, and finally, the full $800 million, contingent upon one condition: silence. She turned it down. "Because this isn't about money," she said. "It never was." Gasps rippled across the internet. Live chats exploded. Journalists sat frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing a career-defining moment or the rebirth of a public force they thought they could ignore. But Karoline was not finished. She read aloud a confidential internal memo from The View's production team, one leaked by a former employee just days earlier. It detailed a strategy to provoke outrage from right-leaning guests. Bullet points suggested how to needle them on air, when to cue aggressive panelists, and how to shape the narrative after the segment. It was a playbook of manipulation, and its authenticity had already been verified by 2 independent outlets. What came next was not just shocking, it was seismic. Karoline called for congressional hearings. She demanded an investigation into the practices of daytime political talk shows, their influence on public discourse, and their role in fostering division under the guise of commentary. The request gained bipartisan traction within 48 hours. Politicians who once distanced themselves from her now echoed her concerns. Calls for regulation of politically biased media grew louder. Meanwhile, Stephen Colbert issued his formal statement. In a rare, serious opening to his show, he looked directly at the camera, visibly uneasy. "I crossed a line," he said. "Not because I disagreed with someone, but because I stopped treating disagreement with decency." He apologized not just to Karoline, but to viewers who trusted him to draw the line between satire and spite. The statement was short, sincere, and while not universally accepted, it marked the beginning of something unfamiliar on late-night television: accountability. Sunny Hostin was nowhere to be found. Following her controversial interview, she took a leave of absence from The View. Sources confirmed she was under internal review. Rumors circulated about her future, but no official statement had been released. 1 week later, her image was removed from the show's promotional materials. No farewell, no tribute, just absence. And yet, Karoline Leavitt did not gloat. She did not celebrate their fall. Instead, she closed her address with something no one saw coming. A challenge. To the networks, she said, prove that you can do better. Invite real debate, not staged warfare. Invite opposing voices, not just the ones that clap back. Because if you won't, we will. With those final words, she announced the launch of her own platform. A news forum built on transparency, unedited interviews, and open dialogue. Funded not by corporate advertisers, but by direct support from viewers. Within minutes, the website crashed under the traffic. The story that began with a sneer on a daytime panel had become a national reckoning. Not just about media, not just about lawsuits, but about truth, power, and the quiet strength of those who refuse to be belittled. Karoline Leavitt had walked into a hostile studio. She had been mocked, dismissed, and ridiculed. But she did not vanish. She stood, she sued, and she shifted the conversation of a nation. And as the credits rolled on The View's season finale, cutting quietly to black, there was one question left in the minds of millions. Who will be next to speak up?